Hello everybody, and welcome to another faction guide for Divide et Impera, the mod for Rome 2. Today we're going to be covering Epirus, which has a rather bad reputation as an incredibly challenging yet weak faction, but that reputation is unearned. It's from the base game of Rome 2, where Epirus genuinely is a near impossible campaign, one which you're going to be at war with virtually every faction in the game from the very onset. However, in Divide et Impera, you still have this diplomatic challenge, because you start at war with both Carthage and Rome, but you do have an incredibly competent and powerful military right from the onset. Arguably, you have one of the strongest militaries from turn 1 in the game. So without further ado, let's just get right into some gameplay for Epirus and discover why they are a challenging but fun faction to play as. Alright, so this is your start position as Epirus, and as you can quite quickly see, you start out with 2 settlements, which is decent for turn 1. How many factions really start out with more than 1 settlement? Not many. But those 2 settlements are a compensation for a rather chaotic diplomatic situation. You see, just as not many factions start out with 2 settlements, not many factions start out at war with 2 factions. Particularly, not many factions start out at war with 2 superpowers in Carthage and Rome. And you do start out at war with both Carthage and Rome. Yet not all your diplomatic efforts are as doomed as that. I mean, as you can see, there's a -5 cultural aversion that you end up having with every single Greek faction, and that's just because of one of the faction traits that you have, but -5 isn't terrible. It still brings you to a neutral rating with a lot of these Greek factions. So you'll see that, say like the Aetolian League, they will be willing to make a trade agreement with you in turn 1. Athens will consider one if you throw in a little bit of money. So you can easily get a trade agreement with them. The Epeiros, they're already moderate, so a little bribe will probably push them into high. The Macedonians, they probably won't want a trade agreement, but you can buy one too. So your diplomacy isn't utterly doomed as it is in the base game. You can actually make quite a few treaties from turn 1. Yet diplomacy is obviously not your main goal as Epirus. Your main goal as Epirus is conquest. It's a faction where you are, from the very onset, fighting on several fronts, fighting massive battles in the early game. This is not a faction where you just play safe at the beginning and turtle up and hope that you can catch an opportunity to conquer. No, this is one where you take the metaphorical bull's horns and you steer it where you want to go, because otherwise you will be destroyed. So let's examine this early situation with Rome, because in my opinion as Epirus, you don't want to wait. Waiting is your worst enemy, because the Romans will accumulate troops at a rate that you simply cannot match. You need to go to war against the Romans as soon as possible and deal them a valuable lesson in Hellenistic superiority. Now, you start out with this army here. This is your faction leader, Pyrrhic. Yes, that Pyrrhic, the legendary historical commander. And as you can see, you have 6 units in this army. Now, they are useful units. You have a phalangist, you have a pikeman unit, you have your typical companion cav-like general. You have a Tarentine cavalry, a useful skirmish-type cavalry, really a hybrid unit. And then a crappy skirmisher, a crappy spear levy unit, and of course, elephants, the legendary elephants that Pyrrhus took into Italy. But the thing is that the Epeiros have probably the most varied and elite turn 1 recruitment roster you could possibly have. As you can see, you can get pikemen from the very beginning. And pikemen are going to be very useful for dealing with turn 1 Rome, because the Romans use a lot of hoplites at the beginning of their campaign. So if you recruit these pikemen, they more or less are a counter to these Roman hoplites. Simultaneously, you have these Thesprotian infantry, and these guys are absolute beasts. Just look at their stats, guys. 30 weapon damage, 16 melee attack, and 21 charge makes them an incredibly competent turn 1 sword unit. 3 speed means that they're quite maneuverable. 2 volleys of javelins is actually rather rare. rather rare for a unit in DEI. Most units only have one volley of javelins, so again, it gives them this other flexibility and allows you to weaken units before you jump into combat with them. Now, the only weakness of this unit is the 20 armor, but 12 melee defense does give them some survivability. So these guys can get picked apart by javelins and skirmish units. However, if you can run them into combat unimpeded, they will obliterate Roman Hastati. They will obliterate Roman Principe, or rather go toe-to-toe with them competently. And then, of course, these pikemen will deal with the Roman hoplites with ease. Simultaneously, you have pretty solid cavalry already with these 3 units on turn 1. So you won't really have to deal with Roman cavalry superiority because they're not really a cavalry-centric faction to begin with. So what I'm trying to get at here, guys, is that if you recruit lots of these pikemen and lots of these Thesprotians, you can make an army that is capable of defeating the Romans even if you're fighting against superior numbers. And that's going to be needed because the Romans, they are monsters at recruiting, guys. They actually have a faction bonus that allows them to recruit 1 additional unit per turn. However, they will quickly eliminate the Etruscans with ease, giving them a full 4 settlement province here. So with that bonus and the 4 settlements, they will be spamming armies in Latium, meaning that you need to move very quickly. So my recommendation for dealing with the Romans as quickly as possible is first ferry this army across. You're going to need to combine these armies because, again, you need all the help you can get as Pyrrhus. Secondly, recruit every single mercenary that you're given access to and just keep on doing that, guys. Next, get some units that are going to be decisive and impactful. Don't get these supportive type units like these, I don't know, these Tarentine light hoplites or these Epirot light hoplites. Don't get levies. Get units that will be able to go toe-to-toe with the Romans and actually have heavy impact against them. If you do all of this, you'll have 10 units with Pyrrhus already, plus these guys will help join the party soon enough, and you're going to quickly catapult Epirus to having a solid full stack army on Roman soil. I mean, you can get some upgrades here, but you're going to need to keep your economy intact. So maybe just go for an upgrade onto settlement, upgrade this so you can start getting public order. Maybe this because you will need recruitment options. But try to spend as little money as possible on this until you have your economy stabilized. Now, I'm just kind of demonstrating how quickly you can start taking territory against the Romans, because it's not like the Romans start with insane armies. They have to build them. They will build them fast, but they don't start with them. So you can quickly score some victories, score some quick settlement captures, and overwhelm the Romans before the Carthaginians are even capable of jumping in against you. Now, like, you can ferry this army across and have them join Pyrrhus. Have all of these guys. You can go ahead, break this army up. Now Pyrrhus is ready to go, of course, and you can go ahead and take Cassentia. And look, you have, what, 5 troops here? Up against your 12? You can win this battle. I mean, it looks like you have a disadvantage, but I wouldn't really say that you do. Because most of these guys are garrisons. Now, this is just a guide, so I'm not going to play this out and rather just rant about how we can improve our odds in this campaign. Because at the end of the day, if I'm like playing battles out in the guide, it's going to take forever, guys. But truthfully, if you can win a battle like this, when maybe the odds are slightly against you, but truthfully, if you're a resourceful player, you can figure it out, particularly because you have elephants, guys. Like, come on. You're going up against a garrison, which tends to rout pretty quickly with elephants, a pikeman, 2 relatively elite swordsmen, a wealth of good cavalry, a hoplite. You should be able to dumpster them, a peltis. I mean, you just have levels to this army, man. And once you conquer this settlement, you'll be able to recruit 3 more units at turn end, putting your army to a mighty 16, and then charge in and take Beneventum. That way you can just storm all of Magna Graecia. Now, in my playthroughs, what tends to happen is I take Magna Graecia really quickly, and then I usually end up having a battle around here. Around Beneventum is usually a defensive battle, because the Romans would have conquered Etruria by then, and they'd have like a full stack over here. But you know what? If you can win a defensive battle with pikes at Beneventum, which is very possible, defensive battles are easy with pikes, then you can just go on and storm Latium and take the entire province for yourself. Now, in my opinion, defeating Rome is not difficult in early game. Like, if you have any experience as a Divinity Impera player, you should be able to do it. Even if you're a new player, you just really need to win one decisive battle around Beneventum if you just keep on recruiting troops at a tempo and moving fast in your campaign. The main challenge is going to be, what do you do against Carthage next? Because Carthage is actually a very, very wealthy, very, very, very wealthy faction, and in all honesty, they could just spam armies and just continuously assault your positions in Italy. And in my opinion, you need more money if you want to fight the Carthaginians compared to the Romans, because they have settlements that are just spread out. The Romans are all kind of conveniently clustered together. So when it comes to Carthage, in my opinion, you need to just collect more territory and defend what you have in Italy. Once you collect more territory, you should have the finances to attack Carthage. And there's really two different methods of doing that. Either you can take Cisalpine Gaul in the north. Now, what's good about this method is that you stay close to Italy, so if the Carthaginians do send a surprise army from Sicily or Corsica and just attack your positions over here, you'll be able to repel them with ease, or at least travel down to confront the enemy. The other thing that you can do is join the rest of your settlements in Macedonia to Apollonia. Sorry, you can join the rest of the settlements in Macedonia to Apollonia by sending an army back through Taras to Apollonia and then taking Larissa and Pella. And why not? It's not like these factions particularly like you. I mean, sure, you could work on diplomatic treaties with them, but it's not really guaranteed to be a thing, so you might as well go ahead and take them. And of course, once you take Macedonia, you can travel down south and take on Hellas, which should be pretty easy, particularly with your pikes, since these guys only use hoplites. And this method will get you significantly more income. It'll get you provinces that are already majority Hellenic, so it should be relatively easy to keep control of them. However, of course, while this army is busy here, you won't be able to defend against the Carthaginians with it, so it might leave Italy slightly exposed. So it really is up to you how you want to handle this, but those are the two methods for expansion once you beat the Romans. Now, let's go check out the faction bonuses that Epirus has, as well as the army. Now, Epirus's faction bonuses are a little bit of a mixed bag. Some of the bonuses are very helpful, but the one debuff that you have is extraordinarily painful to deal with. So let's just look at this, guys. So all the Diadochi factions do get the same buffs at the top here. We get Alexander's Legacy, which gives you a -20 resistance to foreign occupation. Big thumbs up, because Epirus is immediately going to be in control of large foreign populations in both Magna Graecia, which has some Greeks but is mostly Italian, and of course in Latium, which is not Greek at all and is basically all Italian. So this is going to help a lot in keeping things stable, although you still will have population or public order issues. It'll just lessen the problems caused by this. Now this Successor Conflicts is really useful because it gives you a +10 morale for all units against Hellenic factions. Now against, say, a faction like the Macedonians, they'll have it and you'll have it. So it'll kind of cancel each other out, and you probably will fight the Macedonians pretty quickly in your campaign. But if you go on to fight the rest of the Greek factions in Greece itself, in Hellas itself, like the Athenians, like the Spartans, maybe like the Cretans, you might even fight the Rhodians or something like that, you will have that +10 morale. So why not? It just gives you a buff, it gives you an advantage, it's a big plus. Now the Epirus specific buffs are these: public order bonuses from Hellenic culture. That's a thumbs up. That means if you have a temple and you are converting the population towards a more Hellenic mindset, it'll be good. The more Greeks you have, the more pleasant public order will be, and it'll probably allow you to increase your tax rate in late game when you actually have a Hellenized population and you want more income for your armies. So that's kind of good for late game. Village Union, increased wealth from towns, just a general plus. Means that your resources will produce more wealth, so yay, just a plus, no negative, but it's not like a huge buff either. Now this is the bad one. Major diplomatic penalty with all Hellenic factions. So typically you end up having a diplomatic bonus with factions that share your culture, but instead you have a -5. Now -5 is not terrible, by the way. Like I showed in my playthrough, these factions, like these Hellenic factions, will generally still be willing to make agreements with you, but it's just a nuisance. It's just annoying. And it, of course, kind of creates this impression that the Epeiros are diplomatically pariahs, which they were in real life. Like, no one wanted to deal with Pyrrhus diplomatically other than the Tarentines, but they did so just out of necessity because they were so friggin' desperate to survive the Roman onslaught. That was inevitable. So what I'm saying, guys, is that you kind of do struggle a little bit with diplomacy in this campaign, but if you play it smart, you can absolutely make allies, and you can just, you know, glean the benefits of these cultural and militaristic buffs. So now, guys, let's look at the army of the Epirites, because they do have a pretty impressive army to deal with and use. Now, in Divide et Impera, Epirus has a very impressive army to utilize. Much better than in the base game, and I'm sure you guys will like this army. Although, we don't have as many options for selection as some of the other Diadochi factions. For example, the Seleucids, the Ptolemaic dynasty, even the Macedonians will generally have more units to select from, but the units that Epirus have are just generally very good. Like, I don't really see a single completely useless unit in the roster besides some of the generic skirmishers that they have. So let's just get into it, guys. Let me show you why I rate the Epeiros as quite a good faction, particularly in early game. Now, for generals, they have three options. Of course, this Sacred Squadron is essentially just a late game version of the Royal Guards Cavalry, I believe. So these are basically your like generic elite Hellenized cavalry. I mean, you could see their stats are really good. They aren't as heavily armored as, say, like a Persian Cataphract, but these units are pretty fast. They have solid armor, great stats. Of course, the Royal Guard Cavalry is a shock cavalry, so they just pack a massive wallop onto charge at 60. But then this Sacred Squadron is good in a long-term melee. They will absolutely obliterate a Roman equite in combat. Now, their only infantry option is the Molossian Royal Guard, which is a decent elite hoplite. I mean, they're good at fighting. Like, 21 charge bonus is pretty good for a hoplite. 26 weapon damage is great. But 35 base armor is really low for an elite hoplite. Like, if I showcase an adversary here for a comparison, say a Bactrian Royal Guard, which isn't really the best hoplite ever. Let's just pull it from here. You'll see that they have the same stats when it comes to fighting, but they'll have slightly more armor at 38 compared to the 35 here. They'll also have more morale at 52 compared to 49 here. Base speed of 2 is pretty similar, and they have the same bonuses versus cavalry and elephants. But what I'm trying to demonstrate here is that the Molossian Royal Guard is not like the best of elite hoplites. They're okay, but they're not the best. I think they're actually more comparable to like an Illyrian hoplite, which, as we know, is not the best. Yeah, they're actually more comparable to an Illyrian hoplite, although these guys, these Illyrian late noble guards, actually have a better morale. Although the early Illyrian noble guards do have lowered attack and defense. So yeah, these Molossians will have like about as good attack and defense as you can get on a hoplite besides elite Spartans, but they just don't have the armor. And next, moving on to their melee infantry, this is where they do have some pretty solid options. So if you want to save money, you can get these Epirot levies. And you might think, okay, why would I care about these levies? They only have 8 armor, 39 morale. They look like crap. But compared to most levies that are just like spearmen with zero purpose, particularly if they have solid units around them, these guys are actually quite good if you want to chase down skirmishers, as well as if you want to have a unit that charges a stronger unit in the rear. So look at these guys, 13 melee, 13 armor penetrating damage. Basically, they'll just penetrate straight through armor. They can ignore armor. 18 weapon damage is pretty good. 26 charge is beastly. 7 attack and 7 defense is bad, and 8 armor is bad as well. But these guys do have a volley of javelins, which many levies don't have. And yeah, I mean, they're incredibly cheap. It costs like 49 to maintain or something. So if you're struggling to recruit units as you're building out the end of an army, you can kind of have like these guys on the flanks, have stronger units hold the center while these guys outflank, and they'll do a reasonable job at it. Next, we have the Furrow Swords. There's nothing special about these. Virtually every Greek faction has them. We have 3 volleys of javelins, which essentially makes them a hybrid of a skirmisher and an actual swords unit. 4 speed means that they're as fast as a skirmisher, but they're not going to hold the line against anything because they only have 13 charge bonus, which, again, these Epirot levies really look that bad when they have 26 charge bonus. They have double the charge bonus of these guys. Sure, 9 melee attack and 14 melee defense means that they're supposed to be good in combat, but because they only have 43 morale, which is quite poor for a unit, and 8 armor, they do generally end up routing and fleeing. So, I don't know. These guys are just like okay, but they can't really rear charge effectively because they don't have armor penetrating damage in general, only 3. And they don't have good charge. So, I don't know. I don't tend to use these guys because they're so middle of the line. I mean, the only thing that I really like about them is the javelins. But if I wanted to use javelins, I'd use a peltis. So, I don't know. I don't really find these guys useful. Speaking of a way more effective hybrid unit, look at these Agrionian Assault Infantry, dude. These guys, you can get them turn 1. They are more expensive than Furrow Swords, but I would just never get Furrow Swords when you have these guys. 11 attack and 12 melee defense already means that these guys are far more effective at providing support for your hoplite and pikes, because these guys can actually do damage, cut through melee units on the flanks far quicker than something like a Furrow Sword could, so they can actually start getting your flanks, start outflanking the enemy. 30 charge is crazy. 30 charge means these guys are in crappy cavalry territory, but they're an infantry unit. 20 weapon damage, amazing. 15 armor penetrating damage. Glorious, man. These guys are absolute beasts. 2 bonus infantry, just a nice little bonus. And these guys also kill elephants. I don't know who you're going to fight with elephants in this campaign, to be fair. You're not exactly going to meet up with the Indians anytime soon, and the Ptolemies bring horrible elephants, so even if you invade there, you're not going to see them. But you know what? The Carthaginians, I forget, you're at war with Carthage turn 1, so why not have some counter-elephant units in your army? That's just a luxury. 20 armor, not bad for such an offensively capable unit. Especially for turn 1, 20 armor is absolutely acceptable for an early game unit. 49 armor, morale, it's kind of a weakness, that's not great morale, but it's okay. 3 speed, awesome. 2 javelins, gives them that superior flexibility. These guys, if you use them to outflank anything, a Roman Principe, a Carthage Sacred Band, a heavy Celtic Spearman, they will obliterate them. These guys are just quintessential outflank units, and they're basically just a good version of these Epirot levies, although they only have 150 men, so they are a more professional unit already. And the Vesprotians, I went over them during the campaign guide on the map. I mean, you're kind of choosing between these two, and the Vesprotians, they are just more competent at holding the line. At least that's my belief, because of their weapon damage. They output more steady damage over time. These Agrionians are better for outflanking, because their charge bonus is a lot more of where their power is. But of course, the Agrionians actually do have better base morale. Yeah, I don't know, man. Honestly, I think that the Agrionians might be a little bit underrated by me, because they have the same armor, and the Agrionians have better morale. They actually have better melee defense, too. In theory, the Agrionians are actually better at holding the line than the Vesprotians, but the Vesprotians are better at long-term dealing damage. So it's really up to you what you want to use. The Agrionians are also cheaper. They're both amazing options, though. Like, for turn 1 infantry, you're so blessed to have these, because most Greek factions have horrible melee infantry options turn 1, and you have 2 units that are like comparable to like early game like Marian Roman legionaries. Okay, maybe not, but still, like, maybe I'm over pushing it, but still, these guys are really good turn 1 infantry. They're really good. They're super reliable, very good at dealing damage. You really can't go wrong. And then once you get Thorax reforms, you just get a better version of the Vesprotians, basically. You basically just get a huge armor upgrade and a little bit more damage. Amazing stuff. Now, for your loosely bound spear infantry, you don't really have anything special. Like, you end up getting furrow spears, regular furrow spears. Of course, useful, right? Good unit. You get regular thorax spears, useful, good unit. I don't really want to elaborate on these, but furrow spears, they're basically a midline unit. 225 men, meaning that they are quite good. They're really good at supporting against cavalry, but they aren't really your main line. You don't want to have them as like an infantry main line. Thorax Spearmen, amazing at just holding the center. These guys will not break for a really long time. They can even hold against Romans and stuff, but I don't know. Ultimately, These are kind of the generic versions of these units. It's just nice to have them. Same thing with these Epirot light hoplites, or just your generic light hoplites. 10 armor means they're kind of bad, but 4 speed means they're really quick. Really good at supporting in cavalry engagements. Really good at hitting the flanks of infantry, because 19 charge bonus isn't bad. But like that 18 bonus versus cavalry is really where you want to use them. Epirot spearmen. Generic levy spearmen, extremely cheap. But you do have 1 volley of ammunition, which makes them a little bit special, but they also have reduced stats. Like a lot of levies have 7 attack and 7 and 14 defense. So these guys are kind of comparable to the Carian spearmen that the Ptolemies have. Extremely cheap unit, and you're going to want to use a volley of javelins to get anything out of them. But these guys are crap, right? Okay, moving on to your phalanxes, alright? This is where a little bit of the nuances comes when comparing Epirus to some of other Diadochi factions. Levy hoplites don't need to cover if they are standard levy hoplites. Epirot hoplites, standard hoplites, alright guys? Like, you can compare them to any hoplite in the game. They are very, very, very similar to the other ones, although there are some factions with better hoplites. Like, if you look at the comparison between a Spartan Perioikoi hoplite and an Epirot hoplite, the Epirot hoplite will have the same stats. Same exact stats, 43 morale, 43 morale, 7, 15, 18. Yeah, exactly the same stats as a Perioikoi hoplite. What about the Athenian hoplite? The Athenian hoplite has 35 armor compared to the 30 armor of the Epirot hoplite, although the Epirot hoplite has slightly higher morale than the Athenian hoplite. Now, it's the same one as the Macedonian hoplite. It's the same stats as a Bactrian hoplite. The same stats as every other hoplite almost, guys. There's very little nuance in this. The hoplites are the same. But if you can get to the 4X reforms, you'll get access to these Tarentine white shields right in Taras. And these guys do have better stats in virtually every single thing, but they're also late game units, so you'd expect that. Now, you have your greens at Bronze Shields Pikemen as your base pikemen. These guys are actually better than a lot of the pikemen you'll see around the map. For example, they have better armor than the Ptolemaic pikemen. For settler pikemen, they have better armor by 5 and the exact same stats otherwise. We will beat Ptolemaic pikemen slightly. They have better pikemen than the Bactrian pikemen too. So, literally, like, you have slightly better pikemen than some factions, but you don't have better pikemen than the other pikes that have good pikemen, if that makes sense. Molossian Railguard already covered. It is an elite hoplite unit, but it's worse than many other elite hoplite units, slightly, because of her lowered armor and morale. 4X Bronze Shield pikemen and your Chaonian guards are top tier, though. Like, these guys are about as good as pikemen can get, both in the elite variant and just kind of your, like, midline 4X version of pikes. Although, I think that Chaonian guard might be slightly worse than the Seleucid Silver Shield, if I'm not mistaken. And I am right about that? But actually, no. 38, 52, 12, 12, 22, 20. Actually, they are identical, so this Chaonian Guard is about as good as you can get, guys. They're as good as Seleucid Silver Shield Pikes, which are about as good as it gets. So, enjoy your Chaonian Guard. I mean, these guys are absolute beasts. If you like elite pikes, then the Epirotes will give you a great option. Now, for missile infantry, you don't have a ton of options, and I'm going to discount these, what are these? These mercenaries, because these guys are available if you conquer Greece, if you're anyone. So, not really counting these, but you have your basic Greek slingers, Greek archers, Greek javelin men, any Greek faction from the Massilians to literally across the Black Sea with the Bosphorian Kingdom will have these, so it's not really worth talking about. But you do have these Agrionian Peltas, which are freaking awesome, dude. 28 charge bonus, 9 melee attack, 11 melee defense. They're almost as good as your Agrionian infantry, although only 8 armor, of course. But these guys have 6 javelin volleys, as well as 90 range for your missiles, with 22 missile damage. So these guys will do great damage before running in with axes and being a competent flank unit. So use the crap out of these. I actually prefer them over your Peltas, who, while they are more stable, are more expensive. They come from a different population class, I believe. And I don't know, I just feel like the Agrionians are cool. I'd use the Agrionians if I were you. I think it might also have guerrilla deploy. Yeah, so you can use these guys for an ambush too. Now for shock cavalry, you have better options than the Ptolemies in my opinion, but you don't have as good options as the Macedonians or the Seleucids, but you do have Thessalian cavalry with the Thessalian horse breeds, so these guys are pretty good. You of course have your Sarissa Lancers that have amazing shock capabilities, but basically they suck as actual cavalry. People lose in melee combat, while the Thessalians can actually give you something, so I would use these guys. Tarentine cavalry, they have 4 ammunition, 4 javelin volleys, so they kind of are a bit of a hybrid unit, but ultimately because they do have an ammunition, they kind of suffer a little bit in terms of melee capabilities. They only have 28 armor, which pales in comparison to, say, citizen cavalry would have 33, or royal cavalry which has 38. So I don't know, they're kind of middle of the line, but they're really, really good, like amazing at hunting down skirmishers, as well as being able to be, like, if you stick them into combat with infantry for a little while, I feel like a 90 kind of gives them a bit of an advantage. So I don't know, the Tarentine cavalry and the citizen cavalry kind of similar, but the Tarentine cavalry is faster and has the ammunition, so they're a little bit more versatile, while maybe a little bit worse in cavalry on cavalry fights. Then again, like literally your royal heavy cavalry, it's just a beefed up citizen cav. That's all it is. Better armor, better morale, better melee stats, but it's going to be slower. And your thorax cavalry, it's just a upgrade on Viz. The good thing is that I think that most of these cavalry units can be recruited from your second population class, so at least you don't have to expend your citizens, but it's the only real negative. You do have a more skirmish-oriented Tarentine as well, but has 6 ammo rather than 4, but their melee stats do suffer a little bit because of that. And they only have 13 armor, so if you want to have a more skirmish-focused Tarentine, you can go for these guys. Phreos cavalry, yeah, just a skirmisher cav, just a generic one. Greek javelin cavalry, same thing. They're like the guys with the funny hats from Rome 1. And then you have Indian elephants. You have Indian elephants. It's a nice little cherry on top for the Epirot roster, and it gives them the shock capability that, say, the Ptolemies don't have with their African elephants. I mean, these Indian elephants are the best elephants in the game. They could be more armored though, so I guess in theory there's like Seleucid variants of elephants and Bactrian variants, and as well as Marian variants that are better. But you're in a very unelephanted part of the campaign map, right? You're not in the east. So these guys will absolutely obliterate Gauls, Thracians, Celts, Romans, and Carthaginians. So you're not really going to have a lot of competition for these guys. So you could use them to great effect if you like elephants. But truly, this melee infantry corps has so many great early game options that you just have so much class in this regard. Like, you're not going to get these many options for the Seleucids, or for the Ptolemies, or the Bactrians in that matter. You have the best early game melee infantry of any successor kingdom, as well as elite phalanxes. You're not better than anyone else, but you have, like, you're not the best, but you know what? You're on par with the Seleucids to share the #1 spot for phalanxes too. Missile infantry, you don't have a ton of options, but you have some cool peltas, as well as you could just recruit mercenaries for your archers and slingers. Cavalry, nothing special, but if you have Thessalians, you're not poor for cavalry options, so you have some cavalry. So yeah, a very well put together roster with some really cool additions. Now when it comes to the difficulty of this campaign, because you are diplomatically challenged and you started a war with the Romans and Carthaginians, I'd give it a solid 6 out of 10, but I don't think it's much harder than average, to be honest, because you're in such a position to get rid of Rome in early game. And I played this Epirot start, and you know what, I've beaten the Romans like 10 times, alright? They're really easy to beat if you know what you're doing, so once you find your groove, you can absolutely destroy the Romans. It's just the Carthaginians give you a hard time after. But the thing is that your army counters the Carthaginians so effectively, because your Thesprotians and Agrianians will obliterate Libyan infantry, and your pikemen will destroy their hoplites. So as long as you can ferment a strong strategy against the Carthaginians and hold them at bay, you can go and conquer elsewhere. You can conquer Greece, Macedon, or Cisalpine Gaul, and quickly amass enough money to competently fight against the Carthaginians. And once you get rid of them, then you have a really easy campaign. You're already going to be the strongest faction on the map by far, and it just opens season for Epirus. So a 6 out of 10, because if you know how to leverage your start, you actually can become a very strong faction very easily. Yet you can struggle if you're a new player, so beware guys, you can get absolutely steamrolled by Epirus if you're not super aggressive right from the onset, and you just have to go in like Alexander the Great, guys. So you just have to go in and conquer quick. In terms of power, I would give this roster a good 8 out of 10, but it's like a 10 out of 10 for turn 1, but it's like a 6 out of 10 for turn 120, if that makes any sense. Once you get to the 4-axe reforms, you don't really have anything too special, but turn 1, this melee infantry will give you such a huge advantage, guys. So again, if you just go in really hard and fast and leverage your elite units from the onset, you will conquer and destroy everybody. As well as these elephants are maybe a nice touch, so maybe it's 6.5 by turn 120. These elephants don't ever really become super outdated. But, you know, there are better elephants, and elephants can screw you over sometimes, so they're not exactly world beaters either. In terms of how much you should play this campaign, I give it a 10 out of 10, guys. You gotta try Epirus. It's so much fun to fight early Republican Rome and put them to the sword. I don't know what it is about it, but it's just a blast. So give Epirus a try, and I hope you found this guide informative, and yeah, see you in the next guide. I think I'll probably cover Sparta next, so stay tuned for that. That's bound to be a popular guide for sure. And yeah, bye for now.